So today, do we have some interesting stuff to talk about? Shadowkeep is finally out, and as usual, I've gone through and collected a whole bunch of secrets and Easter eggs, helpful tips, loot rewards, and a bunch of the latest news that you guys are definitely going to want to know about. So got a lot to get through inside this one. Without further ado, drop a thumbs up if you feel so inclined to support the video, and let's jump into it. First and foremost, we have got to begin with the pyramid ships. I've been waiting a long time to be able to talk about these things because it's by far the biggest overarching storyline for Destiny. The most important enemy, of course, being the darkness. So I've had a few long-standing theories about them, and actually a few of them have just been confirmed because of Shadowkeep and the things we just found out. In typical fashion, Bungie has been pretty sneaky, hiding a bunch of stuff pretty much right in front of us for years since Destiny 2 has been out. So only now can we connect a few of those dots, and I've been digging through a bunch of lore tabs and concept art to try and find a few things which are super interesting. I'm going to assume that most of you watching have finished the campaign, but if you haven't, then of course I am going to be talking about the end cutscene and what's actually going on there. So a pretty groundbreaking moment in the entire Destiny history. We actually get to go inside of one of these pyramid ships. These are what caused the collapse. They're of course allied with the darkness, or kind of are the darkness in a way, but I'll get to that later. Either way, this is it. This is pretty much the big bad enemy. We get to go and kind of meet them and go inside and get something from them. We'll talk about some of the other things you can find around the ship in a second, but the most important thing that you'll probably notice is this main room towards the end. This is where you go to some kind of altar, and inside it is going to be a massive statue covered in a sort of shroud, and what you get is some sort of unknown artifact. Now again, in pretty typical fashion, none of this really makes too much sense. It's all a little bit random and doesn't really explain what's going on here, but you can actually draw a very important connection towards this piece of concept art. Now, the main reason I'm so familiar with this piece is because it has actually been one of my desktop backgrounds for the longest time. For like a year and a half, this was my wallpaper. So I've had a ton of time to basically look and analyze it. Those of you with a keen eye may be able to spot something looking a little bit familiar, and that is these statues on either side of this main central green thing in the middle. These are actually the exact same statue found behind where you get the unknown artifact, of course found on the pyramid ship. There have been some pretty long-standing rumors from very reliable sources such as Anon the Nine, who have claimed that this darkness enemy race is supposed to be called the Veil, and this main central statue we can see right in the middle that of course is very important to them is also the same one in this concept art, and it is some sort of figure covered in a black veil. So again, some very interesting connections going on there, and it's the first time we've ever seen any sort of figure like this outside of this concept art right here. Now, I've always had the long-standing theory that this concept art depicts some sort of homeworld or homeland of these creatures, these darkness creatures, where they come from, where the pyramids actually originate. The main reason I say that is because you can see an actual pyramid ship, a side of it, behind the main pillar in the middle. Not only is it some sort of giant floating pyramid with the same kind of line near the bottom that we've seen so many times before, but it's also got some kind of docking base. This could be where they actually land down, and maybe they build these kind of big statue-like pyramids, and the top of them can literally take off like a spaceship and just fly off into space. Another pretty strange connection is with the symbols you can see on the main statue. So you can see the orbs in the middle and this very strange labyrinth, almost like pattern going around it. Now these can also be spotted somewhere else in the game in a very strange place, which is on Io, the cradle of the Traveler. So this was one of the very last places the Traveler ever sat down while terraforming this moon, and actually was right before the collapse. So this is a very important place for the Traveler. You can see again right around it in the actual game the same symbols, the same pattern in the concept art is right here on the floor. So of course the most important thing in this image is this big central thing in the middle. Whatever it is, it's holding up some sort of sphere which looks almost identical to not only the Traveler and also the spheres, but also of course that main unknown artifact we get given when we go to the pyramid. So these little orbs above these statues' heads seems almost identical to the same thing we get given, and the bigger version is in the middle there being held up by that structure. Now, even though we know this image is definitely not showing any sort of Vex or Hive homeworld, it does look a little bit similar in some ways. You can definitely draw the comparison between the way the Vex statues hold up their orbs as well, and it could be another case of the Vex kind of copying the darkness and what they've learned. We've seen with the Black Garden and the Heart that the Vex figured out basically by copying the Hive and worshipping the darkness, they can get power. So this could be a similar case where at some point they encountered the actual darkness and they realized by worshipping these spheres and round objects they can also get power. So what has been for the longest time definitely one of the most suspicious pieces of concept art can now 100% be connected to the darkness and these pyramid ships. We know for sure there is a connection here. The statues, the round objects, and also the patterns. There's probably even more in here we're going to find out later. Maybe the big head statues on top we'll see somewhere else as well. The only thing we've ever actually seen these pyramid ships do in terms of interactions was to use this weird like tractor cannon type laser beam out of the bottom of them. We're not sure if they were firing into the Earth, but for the first time we saw, of course, in the mission, they use it to pull us into the ship. So it's also a bit of like an abduction tractor beam thing. Now, I also want to draw your attention to a very interesting lore tab about the season of the Drifter we got all the way back in March, which at the time made no sense because we didn't know anything about the moon or the darkness, but now actually has a ton of connections to what we're seeing right now with this pyramid ship. So this one is about Fenchurch Everest, yes, the uncle of Tess, who she always goes on about, but he is an adventurer and explorer, so before the events of Shadowkeep, he was here on the moon in the Hellmouth and found a weird thrall that didn't attack him, and when he killed it, he found a black shard stuck in its chest. He said it was a solid black fragment of unknown material. The fragment resembled a flake or shard of some large object that had broken off something big, and he said it looked similar to a high-gain photovoltaic panel, which is a solar panel basically. So you can probably start to guess what this shard might be made of and where this is going, but it gave Fenchurch headaches, hallucinations, and strange visions. It also made his ghost uncomfortable, so he couldn't read it because it was slippery and tiring to get a hold of. Very similar to how our ghost started feeling funny when we got close to the pyramid on the moon. So just like when we go near to the pyramid, it seems to make everything light-related just very weird. So Fenchurch did what any smart person would do, and he picked it up with his bare hand, and it instantly gave him another massive hallucination. This one way more real, and this one lasted for 7 seconds. So inside it, he saw hundreds of those small shards floating in the sky on the moon, and debris or shrapnel from a massive ship of unrecognizable make and model that crashed near the Hellmouth. So it's all sounding very familiar. It seems that Fenchurch, after touching the shard, which he probably shouldn't have done, saw a vision right after the pyramid ship had crashed on the moon, leaving a bunch of these shards everywhere. One of those, of course, got stuck in the thrall, so that wasn't a hallucination. The thrall really did have a shard in him, but it was only after touching the shard where he got the vision of the ship crashing and the hundreds of pieces of this debris floating on the moon. So I thought it was a super interesting lore tab, and especially that Bungie gave it to us back in Season of the Drifter earlier this year, and of course that teases the events of this pyramid ship and these weird objects on the moon. So in a very similar way to when Fenchurch touched the black shard, he got hallucinations of the darkness. We also touched the unknown artifact on the ship, and we seemingly got another hallucination. This one took place in the Black Garden, which is massively important. Obviously, it's ties to the darkness, the Vex, and of course the Raid as well, the Garden of Salvation. Now, inside this cutscene, we meet seemingly a dark version of ourselves, powered by the darkness and the opposite of a guardian. This is what the darkness is said to be. Not a real, tangible, like, dude with a gun, but sort of the inverse of light and guardian. It's basically the opposite of whatever we and the Traveler are supposed to be. So they've already given us their artifact, something they worship, one of those spheres that looks very similar to the Traveler. Eris is currently studying it, and I'm sure she's going to update us soon on what she finds, but like Eris said, the darkness has already started to kind of manipulate us and is trying to kind of get inside our heads, convincing us that the light may not be such a good thing. Pretty much the whole time on their ship, our ghost turned basically evil and gave us a similar speech about the light not being so good and the Traveler abandoning us and how we should really go to the darkness, the true side we should be on. Obviously not the first time we've heard this sort of narrative, but the scene is also very similar to one of the most important grimoire tabs from Destiny 1. So this was one where a warlock called Pajari had visions of also the Black Garden, and inside here he met seemingly another evil ghost telling him not so good things about the light and the Traveler and Guardians. And Pajari also said the darkness is an actualization of evil that corrupts like a poison from within. So all these things are sounding very similar. Of anytime you come anywhere near the darkness, it basically poisons and corrupts you and then starts telling you this narrative of how the darkness is the one true side you should be on. I think it's very possible that this dark version of ourselves that we saw in the cutscene could be the playable dark version of us in Destiny 3. We basically know as a fact through rumors at this point that Destiny 3 is supposed to feature darkness subclasses and powers, and this could be the manifestation of that we've met in this cutscene. So we've gotten a lot of stuff about the darkness, a ton of connections. There's even more that I want to tell you guys about, but I'll probably save it for a future video. But regardless, the darkness is definitely right here, and we're seeing more now than we've ever seen in pretty much the last 5 years of Destiny. So, of course, Eris is going to update us on the unknown artifact, and I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we're going to go onto that ship. There's definitely a lot more explorable places, so I'm looking forward to seeing more about this Garden of Salvation and probably how it ties into that pyramid. But as usual, comment down below. I want to know all of your guys' thoughts and theories and speculations as what you think is going on here. So let's talk about something besides pyramids. I wanted to round up a whole bunch of secrets, loot, and a few leveling tips that should help you guys out, obviously, when it comes to the moon. First off, there's an easy, guaranteed piece of loot that we can all get, which is actually from the Bungie rewards page. So this is actually very simple to unlock. You basically need to just link your account and sign up with your email, give Bungie some of your data, and allow them to serve you some specific ads, and that in return is going to give you a powerful engram. This is going to be a powerful drop, of course, that is going to be above the soft cap, so it is recommended. A quick warning, don't get this until you're level 900, otherwise it is going to be a waste. Now, on the topic of leveling up and hitting that soft cap, there is a pretty cool secret on the moon which you can activate, and this is going to be a very reliable way to farm up to 900. No cheeses or glitches, a very simple way. You've probably encountered this guy multiple times driving around the moon, but he's called the Trove Guardian, a very annoying Hive Knight. But this guy, once killed, is going to reveal a secret path, which you may not know where it was, but if you follow this path, you can see on screen right now, and they're going to lead you to a chest. Normally something like this wouldn't be too noteworthy, but in this case, the chest is always going to give you things above your light level, again, up to that soft cap of 900. So this is actually a very good way to literally over and over just reload the instance, go back and forth, and constantly loot this chest. An alternate method to do a similar thing is using tokens to basically turn them into any faction you have a bunch of tokens for, rank them all up, and get a bunch of loot. And this also is going to have a similar effect. Obviously, it's much more expensive. If you do want to burn through your tokens, if you're sitting on a bunch of them for Crucible or Vanguard or EDZ, you can just go burn through them all. Now, there's another type of secret chest around here, which is a lot more difficult to unlock than the Trove Guardian, but this is going to be locked by a series of runes. So it's actually pretty simple. There's going to be the same symbols you see on the chest randomly around the area where you can find it. So you just look around, you should, in very close proximity, see the same symbols, shoot them in the same order you see them appear, and the chest will open. It isn't exactly the most efficient way to level up because these chests don't spawn that often, but you are nonetheless going to get some gear that will raise you above your power level. So still definitely worth grabbing these anytime you see them. Now, something else a few of you guys have asked me about are these strange rabbits you see around the moon. What is the deal with them and how do you interact with them every time it says you're lacking something? Now, what that something is actually a rice cake. Don't ask me why, but for some reason, when you randomly pick up helium filaments or open chests or just do some activities on the moon, you may have a chance to get these random rice cake drops. What you do with them is offer those to the rabbits. So they do function very similar to those cats on the Dreaming City you might remember, but with one key difference this time around with these rabbits. Once you collect one, they actually end up in this room next to Eris Morn. So come down here and you'll find this is basically a trophy room where they're all going to end up stationed. So once you grab one, you'll know you can kind of check them off and count how many you've done. I'll put in the description a location guide to all of them if you're wondering where they all are, if you want to get a bunch of them done at the same time. But again, the rice cakes are random, so once you randomly open up a helium filaments on the floor or a chest or do some activities, kill enemies, you may have a small chance of getting the rice cakes. So next up, we've got a pretty cool Easter egg that actually ties into real life and the moon and science, believe it or not. In 2021, in real life, the Arizona State University is sending this here satellite, the size of a shoebox, to look for water ice on the dark and hidden areas of the moon. Once this mission is done, it's going to crash safely on the moon where it's going to rest forever. But the Easter egg in Destiny is if we hop into the game, which of course takes place in the future, you can go and find where that satellite crashed all that time ago. So it's pretty cool because it's something that hasn't happened yet in real life, but we can jump into the future in Destiny and see what it's going to look like when it does happen. So if you head to the lost sector in Archer's line called K1 Logistics, on the left side over here, you're going to find the actual probe, or where it is/did crash in real life. So the enemies here are 870. They're pretty strong, so watch out if you are below that, but you can just sneak past them regardless and grab the satellite, which is going to give you this emblem. It's based off of the actual logo for the mission you can see here, so it's a pretty cool crossover between a real-life event that hasn't happened yet, reflected in our futuristic Destiny. So most of all, you get a cool emblem out of it. Definitely worth grabbing, and I think has a pretty cool story behind it as well. So I think that's going to do it for today's video. There's a bunch more I do want to talk about, but I'll save it for future videos. Keep an eye out for more coming on this channel. Of course, if you are not already, then make sure you are subscribed. Like, rating is always much appreciated, and I'll see you all very soon with another video.